All right, go ahead.
All right. Thanks, Chris. Can everyone hear me all right? I'm still getting used to where this mic's at. Great. Thank you. Okay. So Chad and I had a discussion about this earlier in the week because I was having a heck of a time explaining the situation I was bumping into. So I'll try to give a nickel recap. I had a change set for GL token selector that we had to revert out last week because there was a number of unit tests failing in GDK when we tried to merge that new version of pajamas in. And after that, after my change set came out, there were still a bunch of errors or a bunch of unit tests failing in GDK, and we determined it was another commit that had been folded into pajamas that was being folded back into GDK. And so I really got to looking at that, and I picked up on two things. One, that the current release of pajamas was running several versions ahead of what GDK was using. And when I when I personally develop a new feature or like a change set or anything in pajamas, first thing I do is pull main locally and make a feature branch off of that. So I'm building off of the tip of main in pajamas and then using Yalk to make a phony release and putting it into the tip of main in GDK. But now we have this delta between what I'm testing against and the current release that's being used in production in GDK. And you add in all of this confounding, you add all this noise where if you have 100 tests failing, maybe my changes are responsible for 3, but I can't, it's not easy to tell. And I'm like, it's kind of blocked me. Like I'm kind of stuck. I've got a bunch of things I want to do and changes teed up for pajamas, but after that incident last week, I'm like, I'm not sure what to do with that, or how to bring it along safely. And Dan had sent me links to the integration workflow, which I still don't understand that integration workflow, and that's just me being thick, which happens sometimes. Um, but I still don't know. I don't know that if that gets me where I need to be. Like, Chad, you want to help me out here? I'm drowning.
I mean, I think the base of it is just that like there's more than just your changes that are in the diff of your Yelk and what the GDK is using. So if things go awry, it's hard for you to tell whether it's your changes or something that just hasn't actually been integrated into GitLab yet.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that's it exactly. If there was, speaking like from the incident last week, even after my changes were backed out, there were like 100 unit tests failing, and it was root cause just down to how one component that someone else had changed was like listening for DOM events. It was no big deal, but it was a big deal at the time because it created a lot of noise in the log files.
So this is something that has come up not just in the GitLab UI project, but also in the language server project, which also wants to do like integrations with other, wants to do integration MRs with downstream consumers. And the issue is exactly the same. The thing you've worked on includes changes that haven't yet been integrated downstream. So what I've written about before, the solution is the workaround is to base your changes on the version that is already integrated downstream. There's an added complication though, in that we use merged results for pipelines or pipelines with merge results. Can't remember what we call it. Basically, what that does is it takes your source branch, and rather than running the pipeline on the source branch, it creates a temporary merge commit with the latest main branch and runs the pipeline there. That means it will build the package with all the other changes that have happened since your source branch. So to counteract that, you've got to introduce a merge conflict. That could be just something in like README or just some other inconsequential change that would prevent merge result pipeline from running. Then you'll have a pipeline that's run purely on your source branch, and you'll have a package that's built purely on your source branch, and then you can run the integration, create an integration MR against that package. Now, there is a race condition here as well, because if someone in the meantime bumps downstream, say GitLab, to a newer version, you've then got to do this all over again against that new version. So our pipelines for merge results feature is kind of working against us in this specific situation. I've long wanted a way to be able to opt out of merged result pipelines for this kind of situation without needing to introduce a merge conflict, but it's not implemented. So it's kind of really hard to automate any of this as well. If anyone has any ideas, I'd be happy to listen, but I think that's the workflow. You've got to base your source branch on the downstream version, introduce a merge conflict, sorry, so that you don't get merge result pipeline, and then use the package from there. Does that make sense?
No, but I'm going to muddle through it anyway. I'm going to be completely vulnerable and transparent this morning. This is kicking my ass, and I don't understand. What I'm hearing is instead, like if I start a new feature this morning, instead of pulling main and running right off the tip of it, look at what version of pajamas is, or GitLab UI is in GDK right now. Go back on my local machine, go back through the commit logs, find the commit hash for that specific version release.
Or the git tag. The git tag is probably easier.
Tag, check that out, and then create a new feature branch off of that. So I'm not off the tip of main, I'm off the feature release and start from there. Like
correct so far,
I wasn't
yes.
even clear about that part.
Yeah. But like I said, there is a race because maybe someone updates the GDK to a newer version while you're working on this. So, and I don't know if there's a solution to that really.
Here's what I know, and I don't think this is a solution, but here's how I've dealt with this in the past. At Elastic, I worked on the design system team, and there was only 4 of us at the time, and we were responsible for cutting releases manually. We did it once a week, and whoever was on release duty that week was also responsible for folding the design system EUI back into Kibana, like manually changing the package JSON file, manually seeing what tests failed and then fixing them. Like we established that for a team that small, that was that skeleton crew, we could not automate that because of the challenges, Mark, that you've laid out here. And we were just chasing our tail. So at any given point in Kibana, the only version of EUI was the last released version we had released, full stop. Like there was no delta. There was no new version in Kibana until we released it and we bumped it. Now, on a good week, that took a day. On a bad week, that was your week. That's the downside.
Yeah, and that's downside is part of the problem that we face as well. You know, there are changes that we know are breaking changes, and we mark them as such. And in theory, someone will have created an integration branch against GitLab, but they forgot to run a tier 3 pipeline, which meant that not all tests ran. So they have a bad time getting that actually merged. In the meantime, GitLab UI has been bumped by another major version. So we're 2 major versions behind at this point, and it can stack and stack like that. It's been proposed in the past that we do, say, scheduled releases, say weekly or daily or something, to try and batch these up, but that doesn't solve the problem. It just makes bumping the version even harder because you might have multiple breaking changes to fix each time. So the way we currently have it set up is that you create a breaking change, and we use RenovateBot to update the GDK for new versions, and we have it set so that it only does one major version at a time. You can't jump multiple major versions because that is hard. So yeah, that's a problem. It can take longer than expected to actually bump the version downstream. And that's major changes. All of this is true even down to patch changes, because a patch sometimes actually is breaking and the people writing it didn't realize. These things happen all the time. Semantic versioning is a lie, basically.
It is. And Chad and I'm glad you brought that up, Mark. Chad and I touched on that too. Understanding of what it constitutes breaking, minor, patch also is up for debate. Like if I fundamentally change an API method in a component, well, that's breaking. If I refactor the HTML from an unordered list role equals menu bar to role equals list box, that's not really breaking, but it's still going to break changes downstream because someone used that UL role equals menu bar as a selector instead of a data test ID. Not breaking to us, but breaking to our consumer, because there's a delta in our understanding of what a breaking change means in the social contract. And that was a part of my headache last week too.
Yeah, there's a classic XKCD about how there's an XKCD comic and also a quote from someone I can't remember. Basically, every observable property of a piece of software is relied upon by someone somewhere after a certain scale. And we are at that scale with GitLab. Everything that is possibly observable, including DOM structures and so on, is relied upon somewhere by something. So technically, everything is a breaking change.
Including our bugs.
Yes. Well, fixing a bug, yeah. Fixing a bug is a breaking change. Absolutely. That's why when you rewrite something, you've got to preserve the buggy behavior.
I think the part of the trick with this is that the automated nature of our releases being so granular introduces a little bit of like a Lucy in the Chocolate Factory situation for us, where we're constantly like struggling to keep our main dependents up to date with the latest. And we end up having to do these workarounds like this in order to develop something that will actually work in our main dependency, in our main dependent, by not using our latest, but like going back to what it knows about. And I don't know if this is true or not, but if either we release less frequently or we put more emphasis on making sure we get GitLab updated as soon as possible to latest versions, does that reduce this? I don't know.
I mean, in theory, we have said in the past, if you add a change to GitLab UI, you are responsible for integrating that downstream, for bumping it downstream. I can't remember where we said that. I think we made a call on a front-end call like a while ago. It's a nice idea. It doesn't happen in practice for various social structural reasons. That would be the ideal. Kind of like what Trevor, you were saying, you did at Elastic, where the people who release it bump it. And the alternative of batching up changes, making it scheduled or reliable in terms of timing is tricky. For the other reason I've said is that you are batching up changes, you are sort of making each bump harder because you're collecting together lots of changes. So you've got to fix all the changes, or you've got to fix all the breakage caused by this change and all the breakage caused by this change and so on. So, yeah.
On the other hand, and Mark, I agree with you because all the things you're saying are absolutely true. On the other hand, I feel like if GDK is running current with the release of GitLab UI, and folks who are that makes it easier to run and fix headaches on a local machine before it gets to we're merging or we're updating remotely. Like, going back to my case, if GDK had been running the same release as the last released version of GitLab UI, I wouldn't have seen 100 breaking or 100 just tests failing in GDK because it had already been fixed. Like the person who had patched it, or the person who had pushed that change and cut that release of GitLab UI would have already seen that either in their local testing or in the pipeline. Like I wouldn't have blundered onto it thinking that I was in a clean or in a known good state when I started working on my change set. Like in theory, some of these breaks should get found quicker if GDK is current with GitLab UI. Now, I say that in theory.
I wonder, is this something the design system team should take responsibility for, keeping GitLab, the GDK, up to date with GitLab UI? Because that might alleviate some of this if it is a top priority for us, and as soon as there's a new release, we make sure it's merged in.
There are definitely benefits and drawbacks to that. I mean, I think it makes our job easier if we know that we can reliably yelk into the monolith and test our stuff out for reals. But then it also just puts a burden on us of making sure that, some MR gets merged, there's a patch update, got to go do it.
It might also make what gets added to GitLab UI a bit more thoughtful as a advantage and disadvantage.
What would, Dan?
If we had to get things working and in straight away, it might make us be more thoughtful of the way things get done in GitLab UI. Because you've got there's no such thing as a future you problem. Everything's a current you problem, which might make the way we work different.
So I guess in practical terms, if we required that every GitLab UI merge request must have a GitLab integration branch, and that's very heavy though.
Does it have to be every one, or can we, actually, before I propose that, let me ask a question. Is it typical that there's a lot of releases in like a week's time on GitLab UI? Like, would it be reasonable to bunch them up and cut a new release like every Monday or Tuesday? Like, and just say, we, the design system team, sorry, I act like I'm part of your team. I'm adjacent, but I am asking because I've got a lot of the accessibility issues I'm working on right now, root cause in GitLab UI. And I'm happy to make those changes and own them all the way through back to the monolith.
So in terms of how regularly we release, 123.4 was released a day ago. 123.3.1 was released the same day. 123.3 was released a couple of days before that. We had a bug where 123.2 didn't have a release, so that was released somewhere between 3 and 6 days ago. 123.1 was released 6 days ago. 123 was released 6 days ago. So yeah, we have a lot of releases. Roughly speaking, one a day, but we do have quiet periods. And the rate at which we do major changes has increased as well. I'm surprised to even see a number as big as 12 here, to be honest. In the minor version number 13, 14. Wow. So yeah, we release quite regularly. So I would say if we we're going to do scheduled releases, it would have to be daily to satisfy the rate of change. Yeah.
It does make this harder.
I mean, I think the only complications with Mark's workaround are, one, it's very manual, which is whatever. And two, more of a problem is that if you base on whatever GitLab is using, and let's say it's like 3 major versions ago, then your change may not actually be mergeable to the tip of main anymore. That's really the only like problem in this. The other one is just, well, it takes more work and more time, and that sucks.
Yeah. And if I'm being completely candid, like, you know, when Mark was explaining the workaround right now, like I'm hearing the words and I'm appreciating what you're saying, but like there is definitely in my mind, which again is thick as a brick, there is a delta between the theory and the application of what you're saying. Like I once I've done it once or twice, it'll start to become concrete, but right now it's so abstract as to be like I cannot wrap my head around what this looks like from turnkey start to finish. I have an MR ready in GitLab UI all the way through to like seeing it through to production. And if that's the best way for us to, if that's still better than, you know, making it a manual process, I'll figure it out.
You know, in a certain way, the stuff that you are doing is kind of almost could be, I mean, it's not very hot, but it could be considered a very warm fix. You know what I mean? Like you're fixing a thing in the app that originates from at least the most recently used version of GitLab UI in the app. So it's somewhat reasonable to say, okay, I'm going to base a fix off of that because I know it needs to be fixed at least there. And then you can figure out later if you open an MR to merge it into the tip of main, whether or not there's any merge conflicts you need to fix for it. In the process of fixing those merge conflicts, you may make changes that also need to be tested again. But for this kind of fix, it's maybe reasonable, as opposed to something where we're like, you know, there's a long-term known deficiency or thing that's missing or whatever that we just want to add in brand new.
Yeah, I feel like some of the things I do, like I'm going to see both of those instances. Like, you know, the one I just completed or the one I've teed up again for round 2 with GD or with GL token selector. That's very much, that's not a hot fix. That's pretty significant. Like I refactored 3 components, 3 nested or composed components to make it behave like a proper combo box and a list box. Like that feels a little bit too big for a hot fix. But like if I go in and change like a string to a Boolean, so one of the ARIA properties behaves correctly, that does feel like a hot fix. Like because that's a known thing. It's small. It's not isolated, but it's contained. And honestly, some of the times like that, it's a coin flip. Like, is this a hot fix or is this like a little bigger thing?
So I think there's 2 questions. One, does Mark's workaround unblock you for now? And 2, is there anything that we should continue the conversation about considering changing with our process to make this kind of situation not come up as much? Because also with more hands on deck, we're going to be creating more patch and minor releases because more of us are going to be merging. So this may also become exacerbated. The monolith may drift even further behind the tip of main.
So to answer your first question, I think Mark's workaround will work for me. I'm just going to have to wade in and give it a shot. I'm sure I'm going to have questions. And I will follow that with a question like is the integration workflow documentation we have in the handbook, is that the playbook? Is that everything I need to know to follow this through?
It's not in the handbook, but in the GitLab UI documentation markdown.
Yes. Okay.
And I'm pretty sure it doesn't have this workaround in it. And just documenting this workaround there is a good first step. So if you want to do that, Trevor, feel free.
I plan to, yes. So we have that written down. Mark, I will reach out and badger you about this some more in the future, so as not to continue to belabor this conversation.
Very happy to work with you on that. Just know that I'm not here tomorrow and next week.
Okay. Second question. I don't remember where I was going to go with that. Maybe one thing. I assume when folks are working on a feature in GitLab UI that they're using Yelk and they're pulling it into the monolith and then locally just to see what tests do and don't fail, or like I assume folks are. If they're not, maybe an increased emphasis on doing that as part of your responsibility making a change to GitLab UI. It's not going to eliminate things breaking downstream, but it might keep it tamped down somewhat.
It's tricky. I would say the features, the changes in GitLab UI, which are added to support a feature change in GitLab, probably were developed that way. But there are changes added to GitLab UI, which are sort of done in isolation, as in this is like objectively a better thing, or like, like an accessibility improvement, something like that. It's not driven by a feature addition or change in GitLab. Those probably haven't been developed like that. The problem with running tests locally is that they take hours on well, not hours, maybe that's an exaggeration. The unit tests take a long time to run locally. And it's kind of just easier to trigger this integration MR. So that then CI can deal with it and run the necessary things. CI would also, in theory, catch things in RSpec tests, which would take hours to run locally. So in some sense, and there's also the thing of unintended breakage, which is probably the 95% of the time where all the breakage comes from is unexpected breakage. Where someone's, say, done a snapshot test and there's a new prop, so the prop is now included in the snapshot test or something like that. So I would say relying on CI is probably better still, just because it will catch more. And probably most of issues that could be catched will be caught by CI.
Okay, that's all. That is excellent context, and is something I was missing right up until this moment. So, okay, that just the sheer horsepower required to run the test locally isn't practical, and running it out, letting the CI do it for us remotely gives us a wider net.
Yeah, but of course, you will get a lot of false negatives in a sense because of this issue that you've run into where GDK is behind, and there are other changes that haven't been fixed. So yeah, it's a real sticky one.
It is, and it's one that I'm going to continue to pick at and continue to help evolve our docs and our experience on. Excuse me, because a lot of my work right now is going to be just that. There's root cause accessibility issues that are in GitLab UI that I have to make the change to GitLab UI as like a self-contained module that now has to on-ramp smoothly back into the monolith. All right. Well, I know what I need to do for next steps, and I plan to write all this stuff down. So I will quit hogging up the time. Thank you, Chris, for letting me go on for a good half an hour.
Thanks for bringing it to the group. I think it's a helpful conversation. Let's see here. That is the end of the agenda as I can see here. Does anyone else have something to discuss? All right, that sounds like a no. Thanks a lot, everyone. Thanks a lot, Trevor. We'll see you in the issues.